Nehawu's planned public service strike has been interdicted. The union had applied to go on an indefinite strike from tomorrow. It follows a breakdown in wage negotiations last month. The Public Service and Administration Department had offered a 4.7% increase, and unions are demanding between 10 and 12%. Government wants the unions to go back and negotiate and resolve the matters through dialogue. Let's find out what the chances are of that. Nehawu President Mike Shingange joining us this afternoon. Mr. Shingange, good afternoon. Appreciate your time. Will you go back and negotiate, or do you feel this is the end of the road? You're now going to go on strike?
Good afternoon, Edward, and your viewers, and more importantly, the public servants. Well, we have always been willing to negotiate. In fact, it is a matter of record that this strike is as a result of a breakdown of negotiations. And in terms of the procedure in the PSBC, you declare a dispute, you go for conciliation, in order to try and find a solution. The employer, in this instance the state, left at the conciliation, if you will remember, in October last year. They went to Parliament, whereas our negotiators were at the PSBC. We were there, we the other representative of the employer. But the matter was ventilated in Parliament through a budget speech, leaving or closing the door on negotiations, and therefore unilaterally implemented a 3% last year. And that's when the certificate to strike arose, and that's where a notice to go on strike arose, and that's why we're going on strike tomorrow.
I see DPSA, Department of Public Service and Administration, obviously this interdict has now been ordered by the courts. I also see reports, Mike, that you're consulting lawyers with the aim of what are you hoping to achieve by tomorrow?
No. We want to confirm that the strike is continuing tomorrow, Gareth. All our members, all the mobilizations and the preparations that were done for tomorrow, in fact, starting tonight, are ongoing. The picket lines will and must hold, and the leadership is already on place on the ground to continue the strike. We have responded to the issue of the court. The court, people who do not want to engage in the workplace, which is where we work, the people who do not want to engage in the bargaining council, which is where we bargain, will go to court, and they will engage with people who are qualified to go to court. But as for the rest of us as workers, we are going to the street tomorrow. We are going on a strike, and nothing has changed. As I said to you, we have responded to the court order. The matters before court. We will hear what happens tomorrow, but as of now, the strike is proceeding.
The strike is proceeding. There's quite a big gap, yes, Mike, I'm sure you'll agree, between the department's offer of 4.7% and what's being demanded by union of between 10 and 12%. Where did you come up with between 10 and 12%? Where does that number come from? Just help us as viewers understand where the maths comes into this.
Look, the 10% that those of us who are on the street are demanding is a 10% we demanded last year when we started negotiations. There is a 10% that when the employer was at a 0%, when we started negotiations, up until negotiations collapsed, and there was a deadlock, and there was a process of dispute resolution mechanism. That's where we are. That gap that you're talking about is a gap between 3% and the 10% that we demanded. It will only be closed when we leave the issues of court, when we leave the issues of parliament where workers are not represented, and come back to the negotiating table and close that gap. Where we're going to settle is going to be a function and a product of that dialogue that you say the government is calling for. Ironically, it is government that left us in that institution when we're in the conciliation. In fact, they were not doing it for the first, the second, or the third time. You will remember that they left us there in 2020 in the arbitration. They went to court when we were dealing with the Resolution 1 of 2018. They actually left the institution of dialogue when they reneged and walked away from a 3-year signed agreement. So they have been always walking away from a platform of social dialogue. They utilize court or they utilize parliament. Now, we were there. Now, the gap that exists today, as far as we're concerned, is the 3% and the 10%. We accept and understand that there are unions that are in the bargaining council now for 2023, 2024. themselves are demanding 10%, informed by the same facts. They are informed by the facts that since 2020, 3 years in succession, there's not been a growth in the salary increase of workers, pensions, and everything else. Workers are unable to recover the devastating blow that they were dealt with by the state when they decided not to give even a notch increase or on even an inflation-related increase in 2020. So that 10% that is being demanded now, as opposed to the actually 0.5%, not 4.7%, correct? On a different day, we're going to discuss the offer that is currently there. It's not even a 4.7%, it's a 0.5%, because the 4.2% has always been there in the form of gratuity. They're just collapsing it into a baseline, which actually reduces that which workers were getting as 1,000 into something about 700, 600 or 500 or so, depending on your tax bracket. So it's a discussion for another day. But there's that gap, and we understand and we accept and we support those unions who have demanded the 10%, because the facts are the same, except that we are fighting to recover the loss we had in 2020 and the loss we had in 2022.
And when we now talk about the kind of devastation that this is going to be causing for people who work in this sector and those who rely on Nehawu workers, Mike, give me a sense of numbers for tomorrow's strike and the sectors it's going to impact. Give me an idea of how many people are going to be involved.
Remember that this is a strike of the public servants, all of them who are covered by the PSBC, that were part of the dispute that arose when we could not sign an agreement last year, and the employer went on to implement unilaterally so. Therefore, it will not be possible to come up with numbers, especially because it's not a Nehawu strike necessarily. It's a public servant strike, and all public servants are covered by this notice, they are covered by this certificate, they are covered by this deadlock, they are protected on this strike. So we know that we've got over about 1.1 million workers. Tomorrow it will see how many numbers are going there, but all we're saying that all the sectors that are at the state, and as you correctly say, unfortunately, the public will be able to feel, unfortunately, the impact of the intransigence of the employer over and over again, year in and year out, trying to make sure that they get a demoralized and underpaid and overworked public servants in an environment that is not conducive for them to deliver a quality public service deliver to our people. But tomorrow, we hope that the public will sympathize with those workers. So it could not be anything less than 1 million workers that are going to be out tomorrow.
Not less than 1 million workers. And how long are you willing to hang on for in a case like this as well? What are you willing to accept as a union to accept this offer from government?
From where we stand, the strike can end tomorrow if the government come to the table and they up the offer that they put in the table last year, or they implemented unilaterally when it was even rejected overwhelmingly by the public servants in this country. The way we're going to settle, as I said earlier, it's going to be a function and a product of that engagement. It's not going to be a function of the courts, the function of parliament. It should be the function of utilizing the institutions that were established to have a social dialogue, democratize the workplace. How long are we willing to hang for? Our notice says the indefinite, but we are saying it can end tomorrow, it can end Tuesday, it can end any time. And that I mean by a strike that we recall, because there is now a platform and an opportunity for us to engage with our employer, not through the court. The courts will do their work. They will pronounce the things they will pronounce, but they're not going to resolve the institutional relationship that we're supposed to have. They are not going to close the gap of the wage that exists among the workers. They're not going to resolve the unpaid pensions of our members. They're just going to do their work there. So it is going to ultimately take the parties to go back to the bargaining council and engage on this matter of 2022, because there's a dispute here, and the law requires that the dispute must be resolved. The democracy we have all signed up for is not a democracy that gives any party to go it alone. It's a democracy that engage and persuade and ultimately have an agreement. That's what we are trying to restore here through this strike.
Well, then, for the moment, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed to Nehawu President Mike Shingange, saying no less than 1 million union workers going to be out on the streets tomorrow as part of this strike action. We'll, of course, keep a very close eye on that, with the discrepancy between what is being offered by government and what the unions are demanding.